When we talk about physical relationship in marriage, the first verse that comes to our mind is 1 Corinthians chapter 7 verse 4, where Paul says, "The wife does not have authority of her own body, instead yields it to her husband. In the same way, the husband does not have authority of his own body, instead yields it to his wife." Many men misquote this verse by stating to their wives that, "Hey, you don't own your body, but I own you. Therefore, you should do all the desires that I have." You see, the Bible does not say, "I own you" here. It instead says, "I yield my authority to you." In other words, instead of saying, "You are mine," it says, "I am yours." So the secret number one for a happy physical relationship in marriage is, "I am yours." So when both the husband and wife come into the relationship saying, "I am yours," you hit a sweet spot of happy physical relationship in marriage. However, there are phases where the relationship seems to be one-sided, where one person in the relationship is so fired up fulfilling the desires of his or her spouse, whereas the spouse is not giving things in return. When couples go through this phase, the person who is giving in either feels furious because their desires are not fulfilled, or they go into a state of worry, constantly thinking, "What can I do to get my returns back?" And Paul addresses this later on in 1 Corinthians by stating that a husband or wife who are in a relationship, they are left with concerns of this world, figuring out how to fulfill the desires of their spouse. The solution, Paul says, is to look at the big picture as to how temporary this whole universe is and live a life without being entitled to what you feel you have received in marriage. So in essence, it means if you have a wife, you should live as though you are not entitled to be fulfilled by your wife. In the same way, if you have a husband, you should live as though you are not entitled to be fulfilled by your husband. Practical way to follow what Paul says is to have the desires but not feel entitled for a response. In other words, I can express my desires but not expect response from the spouse. So the secret number 2 is express and not expect. Thirdly, there are times where your spouse may be all fired up, but you feel lackluster and are not triggered by your spouse. The very same person whose glimpse fired so much feelings with you is sitting next to you and you still do not feel fired up. But when you look at another man or a woman or even think about them, that fires you. The Bible says in Proverbs chapter 9 that hidden waters is sweet and food eaten in secret is delicious. But the very next verse says, little did they know that the dead live there. We all know people who are attracted outside of marriage end up being heartbroken and break the hearts of everybody around them. So just as familiarity fades fond feelings, it is your responsibility to find and fan fond memories with your spouse. So you have 2 jobs here. The first is to find what is special about your spouse, either their looks or what they wear or what they do. The next step is to fan the feelings by either expressing through your words or actions. So the 3 secrets for a happy physical relationship in marriage is number 1, to be in the relationship as I am yours. Number 2 is express your desires and not expect results. And number 3, find and fan fond feelings with your spouse.